Sometimes that is better.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the KillJoy Jake podcast. I am joined here today by Tyler. How's it going, man?
Hey, man. Thank you for having me on today.
Of course, dude. Thanks for being here. So we want to talk a little bit about the Saw franchise. I am so excited to get into this. Just did a little rewatch of the movies, and you apparently did too.
I did, yeah.
Let's just start right from the beginning, right from the origins of this wonderful franchise. Saw 1, a crazy, insane movie with one of the most ridiculous twists I've ever seen. What did you think about this one?
Well, I came into Saw right after Saw 3 came out. Like, I watched them in order, but my oldest friend had seen them, and he was telling me for like a year and a half. He's like, dude, you got to watch these movies. You got to watch them. And like, I always loved horror, but I was like, because at the time I was like 12. So my tastes were still very picky, but I ended up just watching it because everyone was talking about Saw 3. So I was like, obviously I got to catch up. And dude, like the insanity, because like I'd never seen anything like that before. That was, really, you can argue there were small things before it, but in reality, Saw was ahead of its time, I feel. And obviously, it introduced the world to James Wan and Lee Winnell. I remember getting my hands on the DVD, and you have all the bonus features that they would put on there. And I just remember geeking out because I'm like, oh, the dude who wrote it was the guy who played Adam. Oh, the guy who directed it is saying they made it in 18 days. And I'm like, I want to do this kind of thing. And then from there, I watched Saw 2, thought that was insane. I watched Saw 3, and I was like, oh, wow. So I see why people are talking about it.
Oh, absolutely, man. That first movie I think is so special too because it's so different from anything else in the franchise. Like it's set up in a way that I feel like none of the other movies really are. Especially because it's like you're kind of looking for who this person is. You're not really familiar with Jigsaw is. You're learning about his motive, why he's doing what he's doing, but you don't really have a face to the name yet until the very end. And there's something so shocking about that because you learn more and more about this guy. He's so evil, but he also like is weirdly trying to fix this world in a weird kind of way. Like it's his own fucked up way of doing it, but it's so compelling and so immediately gripping. Like you just have to know why these two characters are in this room together. And on top of that, you find out like kind of this mysterious shadow figure that's like doing that. It's like, ooh, it's so captivating. It's such a great mystery, and it's not really as focused on the traps like how some of the sequels are. But I kind of like it for that reason.
Yeah, I didn't notice until like years and years later that like, yeah, it always follows it under like the horror category, but it's really more of a psychological thriller. Like, yeah, it got gross in some scenes, particularly the infamous, foot scene. But overall, it was really just about two guys trying to figure out why someone chained them up in this disgusting, decrepit bathroom, and then going flashbacks to this obsessive cop who's trying to prove, just undoubtedly that, hey, this guy is the murderer, this doctor right here, he's the guy that we're looking for. And then you see his descent into insanity, and then you see the two guys that at first are trying to kind of work together despite being strangers are starting to just face off with each other, due to both fear and, when certain events come to light and you realize like, oh, hey, Adam knows Lawrence through this. You're like, oh shit, now I see why Lawrence doesn't even want to be looking at this guy now, but they don't really have much of a choice. And it's just all about getting inside each other's head.
Yeah, and they both are like involved with each other in ways that, slowly start to unravel as the movie goes on. And it makes sense why they're not immediately like, oh, you're this person. It's because it's like, yeah, like Adam was on a job that was relative to this character. It's like he's not going to give that up immediately. It's so well crafted in the whole mystery. There's so many moving parts throughout the entire flick that if one thing was just a little off, I think it wouldn't work. But because everything is so like squeaky clean, perfect, despite the disgusting settings we're constantly in here, it's phenomenal. It's one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion. It's so, it's so gripping. There's so many pieces of this crazy puzzle that are going on together that all come together for this insane twist right at the end that really blew my mind. Every time I watch it, I'm still just a little shocked, even though I know what's coming.
Yeah, I noticed too with the films, they really took that like I guess you would consider like Friday the 13th Nightmare on Elm Street kind of approach to their movies where it's like, okay, this did well. Let's keep the streak going. Let's release one each year. And as far as I know, it still holds the world record for the most successful horror franchise in film history.
Well, and on top of that, I feel like it's really more consistent than what people give it credit for. Like out of all the franchises out there, like even like Friday definitely dips here and there. There's some weird entries. If it's part 5, part 3 is a little iffy in my opinion. And Jason Takes Manhattan, of course. But I don't think that the Saw franchise dips as much as people like want to say it does. Like even Jigsaw has some like really like killer moments that are disgusting. It might be my least favorite from the whole franchise because I just feel like it's a little repetitive. It just hits on beats we've already hit before in the franchise. But it still has moments where I'm like, damn, that was pretty nasty. That was pretty gross. There's some solid character work here and there every now and then. So I don't know. Like the lows of the Saw franchise don't even compare to some of the lows of other horror franchises out there. Just in my opinion, I like it's one of the most consistent horror franchises that has like so many entries opposed to something like Scream where there's 6 entries and all of them are pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, like Scream's always been like my favorite horror franchise, but Saw comes in right behind it because obviously, no matter what franchise you're looking at, they all have their dips. They all have their, the bad day at the office where you're like, oh, I don't know how we got from A to B, but all right, let's see where this goes. And I feel like the Saw franchise is very much that roller coaster, not just in the storyline, but obviously in quality, because there are certain ones in the franchise that are definitely not the best day that they had.
For sure. I do think the original trilogy though is just so solid. Like if that's where it ended, I would be okay. Like I do love the other movies so much, but 1, 2, and 3 are just like I just think the absolute peak of this whole franchise. Especially where 2 takes it, where it's like, oh, there's more, there's even more. We're building upon the gigantic thing that we set up in the first movie. There's accomplices and shit. It's like, what? This is fucking it's insanity by the time you get even past 2.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with like the end of Saw, that last, very much that scene before he closes the door, like that's honestly to this day I find that to be the most terrifying ending of a horror movie. Not because of like, oh, like it jumped out at you, but just because it fills you with that dread and, that lifelong, question goes through your head. Like, what would you even do in that situation? Like, you're stuck in darkness chained. You don't have any source of light. So it's not like you can try to MacGyver your way out of that lock. You're stuck there and you have to just accept your fate like he inevitably did.
And there's so many horror movies I feel where it's like, oh, we're gonna have this mysterious ending, whatever, and then let's play the main theme over the credits. No, Saw is just screams over darkness and credits, and it's just like so haunting. Like it's like, oh my god damn, that's so brutal. It really does leave you feeling like you need a shower after you watch that first movie every single time.
Like it's so just like it honestly, even the scenes that aren't in the bathroom, since they have that signature like green filter that they have in all the movies, it's like it's just very just like that, just like dirty, almost like borderline like vomit color saturation, and you're just like afterward you're just like, I don't know.
The coloring of a lot of these movies is like, some people rip on it. They're like, why is everything green? Why is everything blue? I love it. I don't care. Like it works so well with the story that they're trying to tell. And yeah, like you said, like a vomit green color. It's just the whole, down to the coloring and detailing and settings. It's like everything makes you want to throw up a little bit because it's so gross, but it's perfect and it's perfectly grimy for the story they're trying to tell here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will like, no matter what people feel about the color saturation in it, it's the signature Saw look. Like, I feel like if you saw that saturation in another movie, you're like, oh, that's basically what Saw does. Like, it like accidentally kind of gave itself that look in a way, I feel.
But hey, man, it's a happy accident if I've ever seen one. It works so well. I don't know. Like, there's something about that bathroom with like the little hint of blue in there. It just looks so gross and cold and depraved. You know, it looks like, wow, this is a fucked situation from the beginning, and I don't know if these characters are going to get out of this or not.
Yeah, exactly. It's truly just like it's nasty, but it's just nasty in a psychological kind of way, rather than the kind of approach that they took later on when they're like, all right, so we had a guy rip his limbs off in the last movie. How are we going to top that in this one? You know.
Yeah, and I think it's also gross in a different way than like a Terrifier or something. You know, like, I mean, sure, you have Adam's character, for instance, digging through what kind of looks like a poopy toilet, but it's like, okay, that's gross. That's a bit gross out, but I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing while that's happening. Like, if Art the Clown was doing that, I'd be cracking up. But because it's these characters presented in this situation, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I wouldn't even stick my hand in that fucking toilet bowl no matter what was in there. Like, fuck that shit. So I don't know. Everything gross and appalling that they do in this movie is just that. There is no humor to be had from this. I am not laughing when any character is doing, like, especially when Lawrence is like sawing off his foot. I'm petrified in my chair watching that every single time. Where if Art the Clown was doing it, I might be cracking up.
Yeah, and I remember going back to the bonus features. I remember Carrie Owls saying that when they were filming that scene, like the hatchet saw was real. But the problem is that when he was pretending to saw his leg, he accidentally cut his leg very badly. So his real blood was going into the fake blood. So that's why he was like, if you look closely, you'll notice that color is a lot darker than the blood in the rest of the movie, because it was both real and fake at the same time.
Oh, shit. He actually almost sawed his leg off. Damn.
Yeah.
That's commitment right there, man. Damn. Shit. I love that for a Saw movie. I think it's like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if it gets better than this one. But how do you feel about the first sequel?
Saw 2?
Yeah.
This is one of my I do have a few opinions with the movies that aren't necessarily sacrilegious, but they're definitely some opinions that would make certain Saw fans probably grab their pitchforks and head to my house.
That's okay, man. Listen, the people who love Scream 3 probably want to burn down my house, so don't worry about it. Pitch it. Throw it out there, man.
Saw 2 is either my third least favorite of all these movies.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I went there with that, unfortunately.
Hit me with it. Back it up. Let's see this thing.
To this day, I don't quite know what it is. It's just one of those things that was like, because like Darren Lynn Bousman came in to the studio with the script, and they were already looking to do Saw 2, and apparently whatever script he originally had was way too close to whatever it was that they were already planning. So they basically picked him up, brought Lee Winnell back, and Lee Winnell didn't necessarily rewrite the script, but he tweaked it in such a way that it became a Saw sequel. And knowing that, they were able to expand upon it, which I really did like, because now, we understand who John Kramer actually is. We understand more than he was just a cancer patient, and somehow he ended up chaining these dudes up on the floor and almost having, a drug addict woman have her whole face ripped open. We were actually able to learn about who he was, his real motives. Obviously, like you said, though, that was the movie that introduced the concept of him having accomplices and not just being, this cancerous old man who's months away from dying, being, like, how did we gather up, a bodybuilder and all these other people? And I really enjoy and respect those aspects of it. What I didn't like was that I feel like the more times I watch it, I don't necessarily dislike it more and more, but I felt like it just was, it was lacking the psychological aspect of it, to a point where I was like, okay, so this is more of just like, kind of like a gore fest, which I enjoy, like, I love the Terrifier movies. Believe me, I have a fun time, especially with Terrifier 2. I have a fun time with that one. But I don't know, man. Just like Saw 2, I love it, but I don't love it as much as the rest. It's something about it just doesn't do it for me. But I definitely respect the things that it brought to the franchise that they both explored and kind of exploited at the same time. Overall.
I think a big thing with Saw 2 as well is that it really relies on the crutch of you're not going to see the accomplice thing coming. Because I think the moment you see Amanda in the house with everybody, you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is the girl from the last movie. Like, why is she here again? You know, that's something is off. Something's weird with this, but why? You know, like what is going on here? I think that's definitely more the intention with the film, where like the moment you get to Saw 3, I feel like the psychological horror is back, especially with the character of Jeff, love him or hate him. That psychological trauma I feel like is back there, but not necessarily in 2. I do agree with you there. It's just a different way to approach a similar concept. I think it pushes the story forward, although it may lose some of the franchise staples immediately in the second film. I do think it has even more, maybe more brutal traps than the first one, which is why like I personally really like it. The needle trap is so upsetting to me. Like I am already kind of like about needles, you know, but jumping into a fucking pit of them, fuck that, no way.
Fact that they're so gross, so like all you can think the whole time is like there's no way there's not some kind of disease down there with how dirty they look. And just there's what, thousands, probably even like tens of thousands in there. And it's just, and I'm with you, like when it comes to like surgical needles, I'm just like I'm not big on it, so don't throw me in a whole pit with it. Just sorry buddy, not me.
No, I agree, man. Yeah, there's some stuff in that movie in particular though that just like it really gets me for whatever reason. But there are some dumb character decisions too. I think about the one where it's like the girl has to stick her hands through the razor blade box or whatever, and it's like, why would you put both of your hands in there? Like, what? Take 2 seconds to think about this. Like, I don't know. So I do feel that Saw 2 is a bit of a step down, but I still really enjoy it. I don't know. Me personally, I really like it. I really like the twist. Even if they kind of lose some of the stuff from that first movie in the psychological dread department. But I do think it gets a little grosser, which is something that I've always appreciated about movies. I love me a good gross horror flick. I think the reason I like that so much too is because it really affects me. I don't like gross shit in real life, believe it or not. Like I can't stand it. I don't like if someone throws up, I gotta leave the room. Like I will start throwing up. I can't take the smell or the look of it. Like I'll start throwing up, and it just gets such a big reaction out of me that it's always just a little effective. Like I'm very much so a clean freak. Like I dust shit, which most of my friends don't even know how to do, which I think is really funny. They're like, why do you have a duster? And I'm like, because I don't like dust. I don't like rats. I don't like any of this gross stuff. So when I see it in a movie, it hits me so much harder. I think that's why I'm so compelled by it for whatever reason.
Yeah, and obviously like something else I like, and I don't know if you would consider part of the movie or not, but much like the first one that gave us, James Wan and Lee Winnell, this one gave us Darren Lynn Bousman, who his filmography I feel is much more under the radar, besides obviously his Saw entries. But he's a very talented dude if you ever take the time to kind of watch the other things that he's punched out in his career, especially his movie Mother's Day. Like that one, who actually has a bunch of actors from the Saw movies. Like that one was a thriller that very much like I appreciated and I really enjoyed. So that was something that I also respect about the movie, was that it brought us more talent that, you know, eventually made their mark, for good or for better or for worse in Hollywood, in the horror franchise, of course.
I gotta watch more of his other movies because I'm really only familiar with the Saw stuff he did, which is a shame because I hear good things about some of his other movies. I haven't. Dude, my watch list is like maybe 40 pages long at this point. So I got to get on that. I got to watch more of his other stuff. I'm just curious what else, what other things he does. Like what parts of his style get implemented in other movies that don't feature saw traps. You know what I mean? Something I'm always interested in with directors, seeing how they bounce from bounce from subject to subject and how the approach is always different. It's always fascinating to me.
Yeah, like his movies are very much like, I think the one cult wise that people will probably know him for the best outside of Saw is his Rippo the Genetic Opera movie. his the rock opera film that he did that actually has some other horror alumni in it, such as, you know, the amazing Bill Moseley. And that one is very much it's a movie that I would never personally be like, yeah, let's go ahead and throw this on. Let's make this like a Halloween rewatch. But it was one that I definitely felt was creative and felt was, I think, because I think it came out in like 2007. So there was nothing else going on at the time that resembled that, because it has its very much more kind of slasher version of like Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, it was good.
Okay.
Actually very good music in my opinion. I know that they actually did like touring, like musical touring with like the actors, and they basically did like, you know, a stage version of the show, and I believe he was actually the stage director of that too. So I think that that was something cool and something that people don't really ever talk about. But I would definitely check out Mother's Day. You know, it's, you know, you're going to recognize a lot of faces in there, definitely. And it was just something, it was a good kind of like hostage situation kind of movie.
Okay. Okay. Badass, man. Hell yeah. I'll make sure to check that one out. But damn. Okay. So far, your ranking of the Saw franchise would be 1, then 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, how does 3 play into this mix? I'm curious how you feel about this one.
3 I liked a lot more because that was when we started getting the exploration between John and Amanda's situation, like their, you know, kind of mentor and apprentice thing. Because all we knew from Saw 2 was, oh, so she survived the trap, she gained something for it and started working with them. This one we notice how psychologically deep she is in with this, and how she's so much more aggressive and just unapologetic when, because a recurring thing in that movie is, oh, you're making the traps unwinnable, you're not being fair, you're not giving people a chance. And she's more of like, they don't deserve a chance, they deserve to be tortured, you know, end of story. And that was when, like, I realized that had Amanda not suffered the fate that she did at the end of the movie, I feel like the franchise really, really could have delved deep into her psyche. So she's not only this former drug addict, which we also find out, you know, later was involved with the death of John Kramer's kid. So she carries that guilt, she carries the trauma of the first trap along with the trauma of being an addict. So, and that can really damage a person. And then, you know, once you become, you know, the sidekick to a dude who entraps people that he feels aren't appreciating life, I feel like that also does something to you. And I don't, I just feel like Amanda was kind of a missed opportunity. But in Saw 3, I definitely, she's actually probably my favorite character in that movie. And I feel like her performance in that movie was definitely one of the better in the franchise as well. So I definitely like 3 a lot better. And 3 was the first one of the franchise, especially with that trap the rack that
Yeah.
turned guy's bones all the way around. Because I don't like things where like you see bones. Like I can't, like I always look away. And that one's like an utter nightmare, especially because they made it so you see like the bones bust out of his leg, and I'm just like, I don't want to be in this right now.
And I love how John's like, this one's my favorite or whatever. And it's like, what? Oh my, he's such a super villain, man. Like that's that. I just, you watch those 3 movies and you're like, this guy is literally like if Lex Luthor was real or some shit, you know? And it's like, God damn, that's so evil. And like he it's almost like he takes pleasure in doing what he does in a way. His God complex has gotten so far off the line by the time you get to Saw 3. I don't know. I love it. It's so gross. It's so messed up. And poor, I want to say poor Jeff. I feel bad for him, but at the same time, he just makes so many bad decisions in this movie. If there's one thing that I could critique about the film, it's like, dude, like just try a little harder, man. God damn. Like I know he's conflicted. You know, I know he's conflicted because everyone in these traps are like people that were somehow linked or involved with the death of his son. But still, like there comes a point where it's like, are you going to save these people or not? Are you just going to let them die? He just keeps going back and forth, and it's a little mildly frustrating to me.
Yeah, definitely his character was another one that was kind of, I was on the fence with. Like, during the flashback scenes when you see, like, his rage and how that's affecting the relationship with his daughter. I thought that that was one of the more impactful things of the movie, because it's like, yeah, you could say that that's a cliche storyline, but it's a something that, you know, so many people have experienced in their own life. And, you know, but then when you go to, like, I guess what you can consider the present day, I feel like most of the traps is just him initially just kind of like walking back and forth, being like, why should I let you out? So I feel like he's doing more of talking rather than learning. And by the time it gets to the point where he's like, all right, I'm going to save this person, they either die or they're on the verge of death in general. So I'm like, Jeff, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I will say my favorite, one of my all-time favorite traps, because, you know, once again, gross things just they just get me. One of the grossest things I've ever seen on screen is in Saw 3 with the pigs, like just getting
Oh,
mulched up or whatever. That is the most disgusting thing. I want to throw up every time I watch that scene.
yeah, especially too, because the maggots were real. Obviously, the maggots were 100%. They just, I remember seeing a video, they were just like taking handfuls and just putting it on like the plate. Like they had whatever they put over the pig was basically so that the maggots would eat it and just stay on there. So when you see them like falling and like moving, I'm like, okay, no.
Yeah, no, it's really upsetting. That's one of my favorite traps in the whole franchise, just because of how disgusting. Like, it is just truly foul and so upsetting that anyone would do that to another human being, no matter what the reason. It's like, oh my god. But that one, I think this one has just really good traps, just overall. Like, I think even maybe a step up from two. Just with that one, the rack, the whole ending bit too is just so upsetting and insane. I love it. Saw 3 is up there for me somewhere.
Yeah, it is with me too, to be honest. Like the ending when it came to it, and you realize like, oh, you know, this is actually a whole family going on. Like, and then you when you do like a rewatch, and there's certain things that she says throughout the movie, like when she talks about like how her family's been through more pain than he could possibly imagine. Like you just have to assume, since you know the guy at the beginning that she's in bed with, you're like, oh, that's her husband, and it turns out to just be the dude she's having an affair with. You know, you think that it's just marital problems, then you realize not only is it marital problems, it's the fact that her son died, and then their only other kid is just like 100% like neglected and scared. So you really like actually feel for them in the end.
And it's really upsetting too, because like you said about like the other kid getting neglected, John Kramer always finds a way to like make the trap so personal. And I think the whole thing about like, oh, your little girl's in another room and the air is running out or whatever, and it's just
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like that kind of fits thematically, like with what they were trying to say about, you know, this other kid getting neglected. Like, they literally can't do anything about her being trapped in a room now. I don't know. I find this one to be oddly poetic and just so smart. It goes beyond, it goes so beyond what people think the Saw franchise is. Like, so many people think that this is just people getting shredded up and maybe they have a chance to survive. But there's like this deep like moral code that makes you think about every twist and turn that gets set up, and it's so smart. And I just feel like so many people miss that because they don't actually take the time to pay attention to movies like this. And this one is one of the best examples of it.
Yeah, and I what I really another reason why I like this one a lot more than two is because it goes back to what you just said. Like it really it plugs in a lot of emotional storylines. It actually makes you like it makes you connect with a lot of these characters. Like in Saw 2, it was like you have like a rageful cop, and then you have all these people who did like terrible things that landed them in jail. Sure, half of them were framed, but the average person, I feel like, doesn't, you know, obviously doesn't really experience things like that. But in Saw 3, you know, I feel the theme of it is just trauma, and like how do you overcome that, especially when it's the death of a family member, not only a family member but a, you know, a child. Like what does that do to you? So I feel, you know, maybe any parent that went to go see it, that probably, you know, hit them in their chest, like, oh, I don't know what I would do, you know, if that had happened to my kid.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's I don't know. It's Saw 3, it's up there for me somewhere. I really enjoy this one. It's much more deeply emotional than people make it out to be. I really enjoy it. So far, like for me at least, Saw 1, Saw 3, Saw 2, but
Same.
I okay, that's what I thought. I was like I don't want to, put words in your mouth or nothing, but I'm like I think that might be where you're at. Past the original trilogy, starts to get a little weird. Some people aren't crazy about this next entry, but what are your thoughts on Saw 4? Kind of a new era for the franchise now.
I have to say, Saw 4 of like the first four, it's actually my favorite like opening scene. Like the whole autopsy thing. Like I remember going to see. I got my mom like turned on to the franchise too, like early on, and she took me to go see Saw 4. And my mom used to be a nurse, so anything's like surgical and like a horror movie, like she thinks is so cool. And she would. I remember like looking over at her, like when they're like cutting open like his chest, and she's just sucked into it. And I don't know, like, and then you see, obviously Hoffman, who becomes a prominent member of the franchise, and he popped up in like what, like one or two scenes in three. So initially everyone probably thought that he was just some throwaway like background character, and then he becomes, you know, like in upfront and personal in that movie. And I actually like Hoffman, I think, a lot more than most people do, especially in this movie.
I do too. 4 gets a bad rap, I think, because it does got some weird stuff going on. But like for me, Hoffman and like him being part of like just this overall story, being another accomplice, I love it. Like I think he's a great character. It's a great setup for his character. And it's almost a little upsetting with where the story ends up going, like especially in 6 and 3D. When he kind of like gets, when they figure it out, what's been going on the whole time. I love it. I think he's such an evil. He's probably the most evil character in the whole franchise. But it's like it's one of those things where I'm rooting for the bad guy, in a weird sort of way, because it's like it's kind of fun. It's like, ooh, I don't know if I should be rooting for this guy, but it's fun in a weird way. Mark Hoffman, I also feel like he shines a lot in 4, 5, and 6, especially. And this is a fun little arc for the franchise to take here, to kind of technically close out the story.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I know some people refer to I saw online some people were referring to 4, 5, and 6 as the soap opera part of the Saw movies, because it got like so like in depth with the story, especially with like Hoffman and like what some would consider like his almost melodramatic storyline. But I appreciate 4 a lot. I don't know. I think it was because by then I was like a certified Saw fan. So, and that was the first Saw movie that I actually went to go see in the theater. So that was also kind of like a special moment for me, because I'd seen them from then on. I saw them all in theaters, but like I said, I didn't come into the game until after Saw 3 came out. And then by the time I saw Saw 3, it had already come out on DVD. So, and that was back when Blockbuster was still around. So, I was raiding the shelves for all of those before I went to go see the fourth one. But I definitely I like Rick a lot in the movie. Uh, Fun fact: he pops up in Mother's Day as well if you end up watching it.
Nice.
But yeah, it's another one like Saw 3 where it actually tried to like inject emotions, because like another recurring thing, all of his friends and colleagues are dying and there's nothing he can do about it. So he's a guy who's struggling with like that survivor's guilt. And what happens? It's affecting his marriage, it's affecting his judgment at work. Like in that one scene where they find Carrie's body and he just rushed in, and then Hoffman kind of gives him that you shouldn't have done that kind of speech. You need to be aware of your surroundings. You don't know if that's a trap. Meanwhile, the dude's like a whole ass accomplice, you know. But he definitely, Rick is also a character that I appreciate. I feel like a lot more than some. I know a lot of people think Rick was an annoying character and an impatient character, which I won't necessarily argue with the impatient part, because there's a lot of things that if had he just chilled for a couple seconds, it would have probably been okay. At least, well, for the person in the trap, at least.
But that's, that's part of his personality. And even though, like, going back to the Jeff thing for a moment, it's like, yeah, sure. Am I a little annoyed by how back and forth and indecisive he is about like everything? Sure. But in that situation, I might be the same way, It's the same thing here. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I mean, he makes some weird decisions where it's like, dude, just slow down, stop, like just think about this for 2 seconds. There's a lot of that in this franchise. But when you're faced with like crazy circumstances like that, you might make the same decision. You don't know until you're there, So I don't knock the franchise for that, although I can understand why some may be frustrated watching something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and another thing that made me really like Rick is like at the end of the day, like you can say what you want about his decisions. He genuinely was a good person trying to do the right thing, but like he's getting messed up in the head because everyone that he like even Hoffman says everyone that he cares about is dying.
Yeah.
So you got to think, all right, what does that do to a person? Because that's like survivor's guilt times 100. Plus, it's probably very lonely now that his wife is like, yeah, I'm gonna go to my mom's until you figure your shit out.
Yeah, no, it's four gets a bad rap, man. But I don't know, me personally, I think I like it better than 5, which I think most people would say the opposite. I do like 5, but there are parts of it that feel unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like I really like what ends up happening with Strom at the end. But the thing I appreciate so much about 4 is like, oh, it takes place at the same time as 3. It's like that's kind of crazy. That's nuts. And I don't know. I think it's thematically it all comes together to continue the franchise further. Sure, like that is definitely part of the point, but it also like covers up plot holes from the last couple of movies. They talk about how it's like how would Amanda and like John be able to like string up this person on the one trap. I can't remember. It's the one detective, and I can't remember her name. Who gets like her ribs taken out.
Yeah, Carrie.
Yeah. I've like totally slipped my mind. They kind of covered that up with Mark Hoffman a little bit, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then at the same time, we're also pushing the story forward with another character that probably could have just been Amanda, but I do appreciate what ends up happening to her in 3. It's tragic. It's tragic. It's upsetting. It's cool. And it's all just building blocks. At this point in the franchise, we're building upon what we did in the last entry. If it's like John swallowing the wax tape at the end of 3, that comes back and basically fuels the plot of 4. It's like, what? Oh my God, this is nuts. I just love it. I think it's so well done. It's so carefully crafted, and it never really, it doesn't falter too much until you get to like 3D, in my opinion. Like all of this is like, yeah, that's good. I'm happy. Like I can maybe sometimes I can see the strings if you catch my drift, like metaphorically, but I'm still enjoying it. I'm still enjoying the story, and I need to know where it goes next consistently.
Yeah, and that leads us into the infamous 5th movie in this franchise. That's for sure.
So what are your thoughts on this one? Because me personally, I'm so back and forth on 5. Like there are parts of it I love. There are parts of it where I'm just like, I don't know. There are some things that like, okay, real quick, sorry, rant. But like the characters who all have to work together it's just frustrating to me. It's just like a little like you wouldn't have figured that out, really? Like I don't know. Like that's the common denominator between everyone here is no one works together. They're all for themselves. Like are they that blinded by their selfishness? I don't know. I feel like me personally I would have figured that out. But what are your opinions on this, Tyler?
So 5 has always been my least favorite. Like even when I went to go see the 5th one, like when I went I remember going with my mom and her friend, and when that was done, like I didn't hate it. I don't hate the movie. Like I'll say that out loud. Like I don't hate it, but that was the moment where I was like, is this where we're gonna start going to? Is this when is this a bad day at the office, or is this just the dip in quality that may have been inevitable? And like I said, I completely agree. I have that same gripe with the movie of like, all right, so there's 5 of you who were all smart enough to, con these people and destroying their buildings, but you can't, figure out, hey, if we all, just give a little bit, each of us, the doors are going to open and then we're going to be able to get out of here. And, I don't know. And I think that they tried so hard to make them unlikable characters that they just became not even like that, like fun unlikable, like how like you love to hate Trent in the Friday the 13th remake because he's such a douchebag, and you're like, I cannot wait until that dude has just a knife or whatever shoved inside of him. Like these people are just like you're just like, I don't care what happens to you at this point. And like what I will say, a scene that I did love was the scene with Strom with um, the box, because one of my fears is deep water, and what happens when deep water, you drown. So anything, and drowning is the most painful way to die in reality. So it's like, oh, what's gonna happen? And then my mom, like I said, she was actually still a nurse at the time when he did that, like the trach thing with the pen. She's like, that's actually pretty smart of him to do. So I will give it that. It does have, in my opinion, a killer opening. Like, no pun intended, but
Yeah, no, the opening of the movie I think is like really upsetting, and like I remember the first time I saw it too. I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, what? Like this guy, he couldn't have gotten out. Like it's so clear, and that kill in particular comes back so many times in 5, 6, and 7, which I think is just so cool. How that one like something so small like that, which you think is just like, oh, it's just the opening scene to a Saw movie. Let's get us all excited for traps and whatnot. No, it's like so important to Mark Hoffman's character and storyline. And it's like, damn, that's phenomenal. That's really good writing. Like whatever you want to say about it. I'm really impressed by little things like that. When you can make something so like insignificant and familiar, I mean, just like become something so big later on, especially. But then, yeah, I think every time we cut back to these characters who are walking through these traps and stuff, it's just like, it just feels so obvious when we're focusing on the story and pushing it forward with the accomplices and Strom trying to figure out like what the hell is going on, who's doing all this shit. I love it. Like I'm digging it. But the other half of the movie, I'm just not as into, I guess, this time around.
yeah, I think that would have, more fans would embrace this entry had they, like, if maybe, like, I get like the theme, like the five, characters, because it was the fifth movie. They kept that theme with it. But I agree with you. Like the actual like I don't know if you would even consider it a subplot, but basically like you finally get that explanation. Like, okay, why is Hoffman even helping Jigsaw? How did they meet? What's his motive? We already heard like Amanda, like what her whole spiel was, and like why she was doing what she was doing. But why is this like kind of like brute, almost middle-aged guy who just seemed like just the average detective help? And I thought it was smart, the storyline with his sister, because I definitely see how that goes back to the from the third entry, that survivor's guilt. And you're like, okay, I can kind of see where that would push someone over the edge. And then you also can at that point believe with like Kramer, like, since Hoffman set up the trap to make it look like a Jigsaw killing, to take that any possible spotlight off of himself. You could see how like John Kramer would be a man with enough pride to be like, even I am not going to accept credit for that, because that was just sloppy.
Well, and it goes against his whole thing. That was just to torture and kill the guy that it killed his sister, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. My memory isn't as bad as I thought it was. Yeah. So like, I think he sees that and he's like, well, this guy's got potential. It's all, it's a fucked up way of like almost doing like a Peter Parker, Tony Stark thing, where it's like, oh, this guy's, he's got potential, but he's got to work for me. But it's, obviously this is fucking Saw, so it's gonna be a little more screwed up and like, oh well, you gotta help me now, or what's the whole thing about like imitation is the highest form of flattery, like he even says shit like that, and I love it. Like I love the whole reason why Mark is even there. It's not just the same thing as Amanda, which is what I was worried about, especially while watching Saw 4. I'm just like, is this just the same thing with Amanda? Couldn't we have just done that with her character instead? But then Saw 5 gives us a reason to care about Hoffman and think about him in a different light than we do with Amanda Young. So I don't know. I love everything about, I really do love that aspect to this film, but I do agree, this is probably, out of the ones we've talked about so far, my least favorite.
Yeah, it definitely, like, it had its strengths, but I just feel like, obviously, because it's Saw, they're like, we gotta have the traps, we gotta have the gore, we can't have, just focus on this, like, kind of, I shouldn't say like an origin to Hoffman, but definitely like that would have to take the back seat, because I could tell that was still when the franchise was in that mindset of like, oh, people are just going to turn up for the traps. They don't care about what's going on, but we got to still give them something. And I feel like the fifth one was the one where they put the least amount of passion behind it.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I do like I said, I do appreciate some of the stuff that this film does, and to go back to what I was saying earlier about the low points of this franchise, like even though yes, I do feel like parts of this movie kind of hit that a little bit. There's a little bit of like almost exhaustion with this film. It's like, I don't know. It still adds a piece to the puzzle. It still deepens everything that you've seen so far, and I really appreciate that. If this is like one of the worsts from the franchise, shit. I mean, like, I can't say that about Friday Part 5. You know what I mean? Like, I can't say that about some like other sequels and other franchises. So I just, even in some of the lowest entries in this franchise, I can still find something to really appreciate and cling to the entire time. I'm not bored watching this movie. Like, I could put on Saw 5 right now and be like, yeah, that was fun. It's not my go-to from this franchise, but I do really enjoy it. Speaking of go-tos, though, Saw 6. Ooh.
Dude, one of my favorite by far. Like, I went to go see that, and I never watched a Saw movie thinking like, oh, like I did after 5, like my expectations lowered because, like I mentioned before, I'm like, I don't know if that was a bad day at the office or we're just gonna expect unlikable characters that are, everyone's just turning up for the traps. But 6 was really fucking good, dude. Like, especially with the commentary on like the healthcare system and how that affects people. And you see this guy who's just this, the cliche corporate just VP dude who, acts like he cares, but you can tell deep down he doesn't. And going back to the fourth one, like the aspect that we totally forgot about, Jill Tuck bringing
Yeah.
her ex, that definitely, I feel like that was another low point for like the fifth one, but a strength for the fourth and for the sixth was we see, you know, another reason why John does what he does. Another thing that made him snap more than he really wants to admit was because, not just because, he lost his child, but because the love of his life is like, you can't be doing this. Like, I'm not going to stick around for that. But you also see a side of Jill Tuck where you're like, oh, this woman's actually kind of ruthless. She's not just like the side character of the Saw franchise. Like, she actually plays her part in all of this.
She actually does. Like, she really does have an important role. And there was a part of me while I'm watching this, like her introduction and stuff to the franchise, where I'm thinking to myself, like, is this necessary? Is this just to show another emotional side to John Kramer? Was this the most effective way to do it? But then, especially when you get into this film, Saw 6, like, it's like, oh, okay, this is really cool. I believe this, once again, I just binge watched all of these again, so they blur a little bit in my mind, especially 6 and 7 because of the ways they end. But this is the movie where she gets the box from John, right? And then it's like all the files with everything.
Yeah. That's correct.
I love that. Oh,
because remember, she, going back to the theme of like the number of victims are typically like whatever number entry it is, and he gets to that roundabout with the six people that are basically always looking up ways to screw over the clients.
Yes,
that goes back to when Jill's like, the final folder was for you. When she gets Hoffman and the reverse bear trap. But I felt like it was a much more exciting movie, like, because they, Strom, or the girl who was Strom's his partner in it, I totally blanked on her name, but we see that she didn't actually die in the fourth one, that she's back, and you can tell like she's onto his ass, like she knows more than she really wants to give credit for. And I remember the scene where they're telling him like, oh yeah, we're basically going to be able to, fix the voice modulator thing on the tape and find out who it is. And there's just that tensity that builds up that scene that doesn't get enough credit. And then they finally break through and they hear his voice and he's like, right now you are feeling helpless. and he just pulls out a knife and just goes ham on everyone out of nowhere, and you're like, what just happened right now?
Right when it's clear as to who it is, too. You know, like it's his voice exactly. He's like, I gotta act. You know, no other reaction can possibly happen here, and it's. To me, it's like that is one of the most tense scenes in the whole franchise. And this isn't even a trap. Like, this isn't someone about to get their face ripped off or whatever. This is like just pure, like you are fucked psychology, like in this situation that builds tension so well in a way that other scenes in this franchise haven't. You know, like we've seen by the time you get to Saw 6, it's like, yeah, okay, we have traps. Like we know that's coming. But this film, once again, the franchise just keeps finding ways to reinvent itself. And this is one of those instances that I'm just so impressed by. I just love it. I love that whole sequence. I love what ends up happening to Hoffman at the end of this and how he gets out of the bear trap. I don't know. There's so much of Saw 6 that I love, even if it's like you were talking about, the guy who's in charge of this company that's kind of fucking over John. His whole arc throughout this, I think, is great as well, because you're like, I hate this character and I want to see him suffer a little bit, but we're going to do it in the John Kramer way.
Going back to him, he's one of the few characters that I feel was actually getting something out of it, because like, you know, they always pick like the main person to go through all these traps, but I feel like they kind of give you a taste that like, oh, maybe they're actually learning something. But if you really watch his character throughout the movie, he becomes more and more helpless, and I feel like it's really kind of going through his head, like, you know, maybe I wasn't making these great decisions that I thought I was doing. Like, because you can tell, like, this is a guy who thinks he's doing the right thing, but in reality, he's just looking out for himself and his company. And by the time it gets to what you thought was his family, that was just the family of, you know, one of the clients that he screwed over due to whatever implied illness that he had that inevitably killed him, and he realizes that it wasn't his game, it was the family's game. And then the blonde reporter was actually, for the longest time, I thought that was supposed to be his wife, and some people are like, no, that's his sister, so I'm just going to say that's his sister.
Yeah.
And, you know, then the scene where like the wife is like, I don't forgive you, but I can't do this, and the son's like, nah, I can do it, and just takes that switch down. And then like another thing that like makes me like not paranoid but like grosses me out is acid chewing through you, and he just gets all the needles to the back, and you just see like the blood coming through because the dude's literally like melting in half. And like,
dude, like how brutal, right? Like what a brutal fucking ending. I don't know. It's just like, this is so fucking upsetting, man. Like, holy shit. There is a moment, like you were just saying, where you're thinking, oh, you know, maybe they're going to do like the right thing and not kill him or whatever. And then it's like, nope, we're doing it. It's like, oh my God. I don't know. The way this one like holds you in that tension for just a little longer. It's like, that's masterful right there.
Yeah. And like I said, it was a massive step up, and I know that it didn't do as well as the previous movies did, and I think that was more of a reaction to the fifth one. I think the fifth one was definitely where a lot of people kind of checked out and just assumed like, all right, if this is the quality we're gonna get, then we don't need to keep going. And I remember that they were originally going to make the finale into a two-parter, but due to the box office not being so great, they were like, all right, well, we're going to have to rewrite 2 entries and make it into one, which leads into Saw 3D or the final chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we have this movie, which, like, you know, you look back at Saw 6 and even Saw, 4 and 5 or whatever, which have like phenomenal traps. Like all around. 6, I think, being the best. Like the shotgun carousel, the people with the barbed wire around their necks, like falling and shit. And of course, I mean, the acid at the end. There's so much good traps in 6. It almost like maybe the box office wasn't there, but I'm sure fans at the time were like, oh, this is a step up from the last one. Then you get to Saw 3D, and we're back to stupid traps, man. It's just like some of the dumbest traps in the whole franchise. That's my biggest complaint with it. But what are your thoughts on the final chapter?
So the final chapter is like it's kind of one of those movies that's like, evolved in I don't like when it came out, like I thought it was so cool. I wasn't big on like the 3D trend that was going on at the time that it definitely just tried to market off of. But I really like at the time had like really loved it and I loved the ending even though everyone saw it coming. Um and then like as I got older, like I still have a lot of respect for the film, but like now that I'm able to look at movies at a lot more technical kind of aspect, I do see how they clearly use most of that budget on the effects and not any other aspect because a lot of the settings I feel were like so they look so blatantly fake to the point where it's like you feel like you're watching like a daytime soap opera like Days of Our Lives. Like you're just like, dude, you couldn't have taken that extra day to, make it look a little bit more, dingy and realistic. Like,
Yeah, I think when like another thing I want to like harp on again is like when people think of the Saw franchise, they think like, oh, it's torture porn, it's gore, it's whatever. This is the movie that I feel like people think Saw is, but it's not. Like this is the one movie that I feel like kind of falls under that category where the story gets a little weird and shit, and maybe even a little predictable, like you said. I don't know. I think that Saw 3D, it still has some fun to be had. Like there's some interesting plot lines and stuff, but it's just nothing that compares to previous movies. The traps too are just so like they're either too mean spirited, like what happens to the writer's wife, or they're the fucking one at the beginning of the film where it's like these people sawing their girlfriend in half in the middle of public. How did they set that up? Like how the fuck did they set that up in the middle of wherever the fuck they are? I don't know. It's so interesting to me, but.
yeah, like what happened to the wife, dude? Like to this day, I'm like, dude, she had nothing to do with it. She's literally just there, caught in the middle of a lie that, like, had this not happened, she would just be living her life. Just, she didn't hurt anyone, and she got arguably the most painful death out of anyone in that movie. And then, like with Hoffman, I know that a lot of people feel like where his character went was kind of a contradiction to Saw 5 because Saw 5 basically implied that he was a good cop, that you know, he had his faults like any other person, but he just got a little, and he was just a little messed up from what happened to his sister. But a lot of people were like, "Oh, he's too brutal now." They wrote him in that he was an aggressive cop that just killed that dude in front of the other cop. The guy, I call him Great Value Christian Bale because he looked like that.
Yeah, yeah.
He, but I was like, oh, I'm like, at that point, I was like, dude, let's just have fun with it. We're past we're past all that. We're in it. We're in it for the long run. Let's keep going, man.
I think it's a little more interesting to think that Hoffman like was a good guy at one point, but then like, slowly turned into like the evil serial killer that we basically know him as by the time we get to 3D. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to me, by the time you get to this one, it's like this is just about turning your brain off and having fun, and that's okay. Some films can be like that. It might not compare to previous Saw films, but it serves as a decent ending to this story, and I'm like, okay, I'm happy with it. I still hope that one day we get another continuation, like just something that happens past the events of this, even if it's not with Dr. Gordon being this like, oh, the accomplice all along. He was like the super secret one. I would love to see that film, of course. I know Cary Elwes has probably no interest in coming back after some of the weird things he's said about this franchise. But man, would I love just some kind of continuation past this. It just, to me, it just doesn't feel like the final chapter. It doesn't feel like that's it. Like it leaves more to be desired. Maybe that's a good thing though.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, like this was supposed to be a two-parter. We were supposed to originally get 8 movies, so I can tell that, someone made a phone call after they looked at those numbers and are like, listen, like Lionsgate's not going to give us any more money. So let's take these 2 scripts and turn them into whatever we can. And I'm sure that they tried because like this is another one where I feel like they really did try. But the problem was they tried to pander more to the 3D audience. And by the time they did that, they're like, oh, all right, well, we don't really have too much money, so we got to stretch this out as thin as we can. But I will stand by my opinion to this day that it was cool having Carrie Ells back. It was cool that last scene where we saw how much he actually helped, but he was more of the like, it was almost like a Ghost Rider version of the characters where it's like, I'm gonna help out, but I'm behind the scenes. You're not gonna, call me in for an apprentice meeting, you
Yeah.
know. So, but I always loved that, and I always loved when Hoffman goes to reach for the hacksaw, pushes it, and then Carrie Ells has that like look of like, you can tell in his eyes like, my life is changed. I'm never going back to that. But he still gets that sinister grin and goes, I don't think so, and just tosses it. And then you have, since at that point everyone was like, all right, well, we're never getting another Saw again, so let's kind of mirror the end of the first one to bring it full circle. And he just says game over, and like you can't help but appreciate it at that point, because before Adam was he was just kind of like, not a shitty guy, but he wasn't the greatest person. He was just doing what he could so he could pay the bills. Hoffman's like an actual like serial killer, just guy that's like lost it, and you're like, you know what? I wouldn't be sad if they never found that dude again.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the crooked cop angle is pushing it, because like it's like we see a murder basically the whole police precinct. It's like that's enough for me to be like, okay, like this guy's a dick. Like yeah. So I don't know. I think they almost overdo it, but I agree. I still really like this ending. Like even though the movie has its weird moments, like some of the biggest faults maybe of the whole franchise, I still can have fun with this one. Like this is a low point, but it's still fun. It's still enjoyable. Not all the traps hit for me. I'm not crazy about the writer angle. It just feels to me like Hoffman again. Like it's like the whole idea of like, oh, I'm going to write a book about being in a fake Saw trap. This to me feels like the Saw 5 thing again, where it's like, oh, Hoffman put someone in a fake Jigsaw trap to make it seem like it's all part of this, just to get back at someone who fucked him in the past. It just feels like it's not the same thing. It's just parallel. You know what I mean? So it's just a very I'm just not crazy about it, I guess. It's not bad, but it's not like, oh, this is my favorite like arc of following someone who goes through a bunch of traps, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I remember reading at one point, I don't remember if it was one of the writers or it was like one of the producers, like a couple years after they flat out admitted that a majority of the were like scrapped ideas for the like previous movies, but they still wanted to use them. So like I will admit that they used them in clever ways to make it relevant to each character, but like the one where like the girl has the key down her throat, like dude, she's not gonna make it out of that.
Yeah.
Like way without like cutting something that's gonna like permanently damage her, which obviously Hoffman and Jigsaw don't care if you walk away damaged, as if you walk away learning the lesson that they feel you should be learned and embraced in life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it works in terms of that. You know what I mean? It does work in terms of that, but in terms of like John setting this up before he died, it gets a little messy. I still don't mind it though. Like I've said in the past, like I'm a defender of this film. I do really enjoy a lot of what it has going on story wise, especially. I just wish the traps were a little more like, oh, this is something so devastating and really has a point behind like what it's trying to say. The one that I like the most though is the one where you get like Chester Bennington from from Linkin Park, like, and his screams are like, it sounds like if you close your eyes, it's like you're listening to a Linkin Park song. So it's kind of funny to me, but that one's just ultra brutal. I love it. It's my favorite one in this whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, Linkin Park's like my all-time favorite band. Like they were my first tattoo.
Nice.
And going back and like watching this, it like now just hits close to home after what happened.
Yeah.
But you're like, it's ironic because like the dude was so like accepting of like everyone in real life, but in this he plays a skinhead, and I feel like they probably took a look at his personality and they're like, all right, let's have some fun with this one, let's make it almost ironic for who it is. But dude, like I agree with you. Once I heard he was going to be in that, I'm like, oh, he's going to let out that OG scream of his. And he did too.
It weirdly elevates it for me. It's just like, yeah, like I'm kind of like vibing with this trap while it's happening. I'm disgusted, but I'm also like vibing out, like I'm listening to a Linkin Park song or something. I don't know. It's weird. I really enjoy this one. It's a big standout in this movie for me. But Speaking of a movie that's not so big of a standout, we got Jigsaw, which comes out many, many years later from some new writers, which, in my opinion, have been totally redeemed with Saw X, same writers. But you want to talk about low spots, man? This is the only Saw film that I personally just don't care for. But Tyler, what are your thoughts on Jigsaw?
Yeah, so remember that time where I was like, yeah, I have some controversial opinions.
Oh,
I was one of them. I will admit to you, I'm not gonna lie. So when I first watched it, like that was the Saw movie that I hadn't seen in theaters. Like it was one of those that I just didn't get around to it. I'm like, I'll go see it, but like at this point, like it might just be at the milking it stage of the franchise, like so many, horror franchises tend to do once in a while. I actually ended up watching it when I got the Blu-ray set of what all the Saws were at the time. And that was one of my marathons, and I was like, oh shit, I haven't seen Jigsaw yet. This is the first time for me. And I had heard mixed things, but I ignored it. I'm like, it's a Saw movie. It's not gonna ever get critical acclaim, which I ate my words this year for that, but we're almost there. Jigsaw, the first time I watched it, I'm like, this is fine. Cool twist, it's a flashback, what we see was 10 years prior. But I walked away not I walked away just not like, whoa, that was fresh, back to the roots. We're back. And it took probably 3 or 4 viewings to the point where I was like, I actually kind of really like this movie. When it does the reveal with the detective, I didn't like that for like a second he had almost like a Darth Vader thing with his voice. Like, I am him. I'm like, dude, you're not a Terminator. Let's chill out for a sec. Because then his voice just goes back to normal when he gives like, the monologue of like everything that just happened. I wasn't big on that. And I know a lot of people weren't big on the cinematography, how they made it look a lot more clean. I know that a lot of people felt like that was kind of like a something that really didn't do the franchise justice, because the color palette that's the signature branding that that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, right.
But Jigsaw is like, I definitely respect and understand why people don't like it, but I don't know, man. I think it's like that thing that make people love the second one so much. There's just that thing that makes me love Jigsaw all that much.
I gotcha. I like, my thing about it is I'm just not crazy about this being the first set of Jigsaw traps. Like we're dealing with like real obscure people in Jigsaw's life. Why would these be the first people we target? Like one of them is like the guy that sold his nephew like a faulty bike or something. It's like, why is this the first person that John has on his mind to put in a trap? There's just things like that where it's like, this is clearly Saw 8, but it's trying to be Saw 0, at the same time. So I think that confliction especially is what bugs me about it. And it's also just kind of the same twist as Saw 2 again. But besides that, I do think there are moments about this that are good. Like, once again, I stand by my words, low points in this franchise are nowhere near as bad as other ones. I don't think that this is a 0 out of 10 or anything. This has some really good moments. The shotgun trap and the lasers and shit at the end, like, that's really a big standout from this one. Those are some of my favorite traps in the whole thing. Especially when he's like, this is your key to freedom, and then they fuck it up. That's upsetting. That's one of the most upsetting endings to a Saw trap I think I've ever seen, which kind of gave me the same feel as like the original film in a way, where it's like the key goes down to, key, exactly. Yeah. You know exactly what I'm saying. So I don't know. There is a lot to love in this one, but maybe the least amount of things to love as well from the whole, at least for me.
Yeah.
From the whole franchise.
It definitely, what I did not like about that movie were the players in it, because a lot of them were like, dude, how could you possibly know that situation? Like, if it sold your family member a faulty bike, like, and you didn't do anything about it, like you didn't call the police, or like the girl who tried to steal the woman's handbag and her inhaler was in it, like, dude, if you saw that, why didn't you call the police? Like, you're an eyewitness. So it's like, it's just like, I felt like the players in it, besides his neighbor, I felt were very just unrealistic, in a sense of like, there's no way, like, I know he's like the master plan of having a plan then a backup plan, and then hey, if that plan doesn't work, I have 17 more plans. It should, and if those don't work, I got three more accomplices that'll have their own plans. So yeah, we're doing this. So I definitely, that is something about Jigsaw I do not like. I don't like the players in it from a from an aspect of like I past movies I'm like, all right, I believe that. I believe how he could know this person. But and it brought to light a small thing that I didn't like about the end of Saw 3, which is when Jeff plays the tape at the end and he reveals that he has his daughter, and then he goes, I am personally responsible for the death of your son. But it's not explored whatsoever in any past movie. And I'm like, that makes me think of that. So like I said, I definitely get and respect and understand completely people who don't care for this movie. It's actually the entry where I don't like debate with people on it, because it's like I understand their side so much that I'm like, I can't even argue with any of that.
That's exactly how I am with Spiral though, because I really enjoy the film, but I totally get it if you don't like it, because it's like there are elements to it that suck, like straight up. But I just really like a lot of the traps, and I guess I'm in the minority about this, man. But like I really like Chris Rock as the lead. Like I guess no one else does, but I I don't know. I enjoy him. I think he's funny. I think he's a compelling main character, but I guess that's just me. But what are your thoughts on Spiral though? The ninth entry, basically trying to reinvent the whole franchise.
Dude, I love Spiral. I'm with you 100%. I love Chris Rock. I love him trying to break out of his comfort zone while at the same time reminding people, hey, this is arguably one of the most successful stand-up comedians, in the past 30 years. Because I remember him saying in an interview, no, it was either him or Darren Lynn Bosman, because I remember he came back to direct the movie. Basically, Chris Rock, since he created the story for it, and it was basically his brainchild, that he told the screenwriters, handle the script, I'm going to handle the comedy. And everyone knows Chris Rock knows how to improvise, and apparently he improvised a lot. I guess that there's like a lot of unused footage of like different jokes, like at the very beginning when he's talking about Forrest Gump, and he has that like Chris Rock flavor to it. Apparently, like there's like a few different takes with different jokes that he has about that, and I just respect it. I respect it because it truly, especially upon the rewatch that I just did, was the first time I rewatched it with Spiral, and it truly it stands behind the fact that it's not a Saw, it's a Saw entry, but it's still a spin-off. It acknowledges John Kramer, but it doesn't try to be Saw 9. It does its own thing. It goes back to the detective roots. It goes back to the psychological roots of it. I didn't like the voice that they use for like the pig. Like I get that they needed to recreate something, so I respect it. But I feel like they could have done something a bit more menacing. I feel like the voice that they picked was someone who was like going through puberty, like midway through recording it. If that makes like
yes, yeah.
Like I feel like hello detective. Like, oh man.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not perfect, you know what I mean? I agree with you where I like that it's a spin-off, very much so. It's not trying to be Saw 9, but it has its faults in the fact that I just don't think the voice, like the pig mask is cool. I like that, like that's what you see on screen, but the hello detective, like, well, I'm gonna kill you now. It's too goofy. I'm kind of laughing every time the voice comes on. And of course, I mean, listen, a million people have said this. I'm not going to be the first or last one to say it. The twist sucks. It's so obvious. You know exactly what's coming. I will say, though, like, writer Josh Stolberg has said, like, that's not supposed to be the twist. Like, the twist is supposed to be what ends up happening to his dad. And I get that, but the whole time we're looking for who the Jigsaw killer is. We should have made the murder mystery aspect a little better. Why couldn't that have been good? And also the ending visual be so representative of the commentary as well? I don't know. I think you could have done both things personally, but I still do really enjoy this one. I think the traps are fucking vicious, and we got Sam Jackson and Chris Rock in a Saw movie together, and he's like, "You want to play a game, motherfucker?" Like that's awesome. Look, that was worth the price of admission for me.
Arguably, that was golden right there. And I mean, reality, everyone was waiting for that line, and then he delivered it, and we're like, "Dude, this is perfect. How is that scene perfect?" But I agree with you on the twist. I wasn't big on it. Like when I first watched it, I had my suspicions, but I was hoping I was wrong. I was really enjoying the movie a lot to the point where I didn't let it bother me. I was like, all right, well, we'll go there, I guess. Because for a sec, I was like, what if he actually does turn Chris Rock into kind of like his accomplice? What if we kind of go down that road? Because like it was the same thing as Jigsaw. They wanted to start a new trilogy. You know, it was our second reboot, you know, in like less than 10 years. It was what, like 4 years by that point. Um, so I was like, that's an interesting direction. I feel like that would have been a more interesting direction if they had done that. They had written that into the point where, like, all right, Chris Rock acknowledges, like, hey, all these cops screwed me over. They call me a rat. They set me up. I got shot and almost killed because of them. What if this dude has a point, despite the fact that, you know, he is torturing people? But I remember I went to see it with my two best friends, one of which being my buddy who I'm doing Deep Red Pictures with.
Nice.
They saw it a lot quicker than me. We all went out for food afterwards to discuss it, and they were like, and one of my friends was saying to the other, like, yeah, that kid, that's him. He did it.
Yeah, it's a little obvious because they don't really set up like too many red herrings. Like there are two other like cop characters that I could have seen potentially being the killer. Like you kind of early on you kind of get this idea that yeah, it's one of the cops doing this. But I just wish they had built up the red herrings better because like the one cop that's like kind of a dick gets killed early on, and then the other one is just like in and out of the movie. I don't know. And then you know I think he dies in the glass trap, or yeah, the guy that like Chris Rock was like, oh, this is a corrupt cop or whatever. You're kind of thinking, oh, maybe it could be him. I don't know. There's not enough work done with the red herrings for you to pull the wool over my eyes, I guess is my point. And I think to me, though, the most compelling aspect to the film is something that the movie doesn't even touch on. It's just the idea that it's like John Kramer's legacy is influencing this other person out there in the world who sees something wrong with a corrupt institution and decides to do something about it in John Kramer fashion. So it's like, wow, like even if we don't get any other continuation past the events of Saw 3D, it's like the idea that another person would go out of their way to do shit like this is like, oh, so the idea of John Kramer is still out there. We could do another movie like Spiral at some point and potentially execute it better. To me, that's what I love about this film. I love what it stands for. I love what it like the ideas that in this universe, like John Kramer is known all around the world for kind of influencing this weird trap behavior. I love it. I think it's really interesting to me. It's very thought provoking, and I would love to see another movie executed just a little better with this same concept, because I think it could really work if done well, if they're you know kind of done with the Prime storyline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and something that another fan theory that I came across not long ago that actually made 3D a little bit better for me was the scene where where Lawrence basically catches Hoffman, and you know you see all those other dudes in pig masks, and you're like, who are these people? Is this a cult or what's going on? Like, apparently there's a fan theory that the reason why Carrie Ells, like why Lawrence Gordon was always at those like trauma meetings was because he was finding people to help him and like yeah basically turning it into a cult. And once I heard that, I'm like, okay, I could believe that. What if like the dude from Spiral was like someone who maybe came across like one of these like Jigsaw cult members and got brainwashed and was like, all right, I can fix the system and I'll use John Kramer as a blueprint. So that is something that I always thought was kind of a cool aspect, and I feel like makes both 3D and Spiral just a little bit more better for me, because like you said, you're like, what if he's influencing these people who are like, oh, I'm a vigilante, when really they're psycho.
Yeah, right, right. I think it's the idea that John Kramer's legacy makes these other people think that he was a superhero when really he's just a maniac. And that's what to me is so compelling about this franchise is it really could go on forever because of what John Kramer did and the legacy and impact he had in obviously a very negative way, but some people don't see it that way. And I think that's what's so great about that. I think that's where hopefully the Scream franchise is going to in a similar sense. I don't know. I just really, I love that idea. Like if you can do something so powerful yet so evil, it could influence people and people could take it the wrong way. That's how many people we have in the world that with varying opinions. You know, it's just a scary thing to think about how big just the idea of not even vengeance, but the idea of just like you think the world needs to be a certain way, so I'm going to try to correct it. You know what I mean? That idea, because it's so powerful in John Kramer, can be so infectious to other people who see something similar, like Max Minghell's character here, who his father died due to a corrupt police system, Article 8 and all that. So he's like, well, this is how we're going to approach it. This is the only kind of reform that actually gets results when it really doesn't. It's fucked up, but I don't know. To me, it's just so interesting. I hope 100 more Saw movies come out.
So now we're on to the what has become slowly becoming the golden child.
People, yeah, Saw. So people are calling Saw X their absolute favorite from the franchise. Like people are like, "Damn, this is a movie that offers something that none of the other movies really do." What are your thoughts on Saw X though? Do you feel like it's a little overhyped? Are you happy with this entry? Is it the best one? Like, what are your thoughts, Tyler?
Well, with Saw X, like when I heard it was coming out, I was like, "Cool, another Saw movie. I know I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna expect probably whatever." And initially, I thought it was a Spiral sequel when they first announced it, and they were just calling it Saw 10 because that's what you call it. That's the working title that you give. And then they're like, "No, it's Saw X. It's a continuation." And I'm like, are you guys really gonna go this route?" And then people are like, "Oh, it's gonna take place between 1 and 2," and I was like, "Okay. I mean, I guess I can buy that." And he's Tobin Bell's a lot older now, like way older than he was before. I mean, we're talking next year will be 20 years since the first one. And I was like, all right, I can get behind that. That's cool. And then the embargo lifted. And people were like calling it, oh, the best Saw movie. It's their favorite Saw movie since the first one. There's actual like real emotion. This is Tobin Bell's best performance. And I'm like, fuck is this? What's going on? What's happening here? Like I didn't know what what multiverse reality I was in. And so me and my girlfriend and her friend, we went to go see it. And like I had expectations, but at the same time I'm like, it's a Saw movie, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score and I'm like, this is light years beyond even the first one. And like I'm a person who doesn't care about Rotten Tomato scores. Like I'm definitely, I'm interested in it, but it's whatever to me. But I watched it and I'm like, everything people were saying was like on point. And like you see an emotional John Kramer, and he comes across these people who are the most evil characters in the whole franchise. And you root for John Kramer for the first time. Like before, it was certain things like, all right, that's fun. I could see why Kramer doesn't like them. But in this, you're like, I'm on this dude's side. I'm on him, Amanda's side. And like, how is this happening right now? And basically, like, just what was her name? Cecilia, the main.
Yeah.
She's like, they did so well in creating the most evil, diabolical, unapologetic, just like character. Like, but it goes back to they made her fun to hate. Much like I always use when I say love to hate, I always use Trent from Friday the 13th as an example, because you're like, all right, this is a woman who gathers a team of not even real doctors and cons these dying people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, people who hope is all they have. And it's just like, all you can do the whole movie is just be like, I can't wait for you to get yours. I can't wait for it to happen. And then you feel that even more in the scene where her name, what was her name? Gabriella?
Yeah.
Girl,
Yep.
like when she gets burned and has to break her arm and her leg, falls and is still alive, and you're like, all right, this girl, she was in on it, but she was arguably the least, troublesome. And Cecilia's like, nah, dude, can't have a loose end, and just cracks her neck. And I'm like, wait, what? Huh? Like, I know you don't like these people, but come on, Cecilia. Like,
Th-
throw a someone who's not your boyfriend.
yeah. Yeah. I like my thing about Saw X that I love so much is like, you detailed some like really emotional moments, and the main character just being probably one of the most evil person, like one of the most evil people to ever be in a saw trap in this film. It's done so well because it's like you hate this. It's the lesser of two evils, really. Like you're rooting for John Kramer because this other person is just so much more evil. But on top of that, I feel like Saw X, while I don't know if it's my absolute favorite from the franchise, it offers something that none of the other ones do. And it's this intensely emotional aspect and side to John Kramer we've never seen. I would refer to John Kramer in at least the first three movies as like a supervillain. Like he is basically evil and he thinks he's God, he thinks he's correcting people and all that. But then we get to see the man, the actual human being behind all of this in Saw X. It starts off with him, like just coming to terms with his mortality. I mean, he sees somebody and he's thinking about putting them in a saw trap, but it's like, oh, they make the right choice. And I love that. I'm not crazy about fake outs usually, but that was one that I really appreciated because I was like, wow, that was really interesting. Like we see him sparing people who don't deserve it. He really only does put people in saw traps who he thinks deserves it. And to me, that's so fascinating. That's so interesting. And for the first time in my entire life, a Saw film made me cry. Now, listen, Saw films have elicited many emotions out of me. I have been so disgusted by some of the shit that is in this franchise, and I love it. Like, oh my God, I can't get enough of it. But for the first time, I'm like, I almost have tears in my eyes when John Kramer goes back and finds out it was all a ruse, and he throws the bottle of tequila on the ground and screams. It's like, fuck! Oh my God! It's just an amazing movie from start to finish. And it is basically just a simple revenge plot if you really think about it without the revenge. It's more about the reawakening. And that's why I feel like so many people saw the ending of this one and didn't like it because I feel like they missed the point. Like, I mean, John spells it out for you. He literally says this isn't about retribution. This is a reawakening. And Cecilia lives at the end of this movie, but that's not the point. The point is not, I want to kill all of you. It's about teaching a lesson. That's what John has always been about. And I feel like this movie gets him so well. Like this movie understands the human side of John Kramer more than maybe any other film in the franchise.
Yeah, and it actually, believe it or not, made me love 6 even more. And the reason why is because, so like you said, there's this one thing that like this guy who's dying is, clinging on to. Like he's like, I may be able to actually live the rest of my life. And it made me think of the flashback scene that he was in the 6th one when he goes to the VP dude and he hands him that slip and he's like talking about like the suicide cells and he wants to use this experimental treatment. And I felt like whether or not that scene took place before or after, Saw X, it means that there's been more than one time that this guy has just been let down by false hope. In Saw 10, it was the false hope that he got this surgery to remove a tumor that had a 90% success rate. And then you have Saw 6, where it's like, all right, you have this guy that once again, he's in another country and he's doing like kind of like experimental treatment, but he has a certain percentage of success rate. And you're just like, God, that's like, I mean, obviously Saw X, he took a bigger L because like Saw 6, he just didn't get coverage for it, but he paid these people and like, he probably didn't take his money back either. If you really think about it, I mean, because it kind of seemed like it burned up in that one room that Cecilia and her boyfriend were in. But
well, doesn't he give the money to the kid at the end of the movie, or?
That's right, he does. Well, so it still goes back to he still doesn't take his money back.
Yeah, and I think that once again reinforces the whole idea that this is not about revenge. You know what I mean? Like, sure, you can look at this movie and say it follows a revenge format, but that's not what it's about. And I just love it. Like, I think this is so well crafted in a way that You can easily misunderstand it, but it's has such a poignant like thing it's trying to say. And it's all there. It's all like if you really think about it, it's all there and it's done so well. It's just in a really weird format, but it works. It works so well. I love this film. It's one of my favorites of the whole franchise. I don't know if it's number one though. I don't know if it's like, is this number one? I don't know. I think I still kind of like 6 and 1 better, but I love Saw X though. I mean, it's one of my favorite horror movies of the year and one of the best from this franchise.
Yeah, and definitely, I think the thing too that I loved the most about it was you finally saw Amanda and John's relationship and like the mentoring. Because at first, when she first got, they announced she was coming back, I'm like, oh, this is just going to be, probably something just, to pander to the fans, to make us, fangirl over everything. And then, like, when I heard the reviews that she actually has like an impactful, like, presence in the movie, you can't help but, really feel for her, especially the scene with Gabriella, since Gabriella is an addict and she connects with her. And I was talking to another friend of mine who she saw the movie and she's like, there's probably people in the audience who are also addicts and they're also connecting with the character. So they're sympathizing with her. They're sympathizing with Amanda. And that was the first time since the very first movie you sympathize with Amanda. Even in the first one, you barely do. You're like, this is just some girl who was doing bad things. She was using drugs. Luckily enough, she got out, but that was all you really get. In this one, like, I felt bad for her. Like, you feel like this is a girl who was like, she finally found a connection with like almost like a father figure. And now she's coming across a girl who she literally understands her struggles and like those demons. And she even tries to help her. But John's like, sorry, she has to do the same thing as everyone else just for Cecilia to come around the corner and do what she does, which obviously I think contributes to the rage that you see Amanda feel in the third one. I honestly, personally feel like that's what contributes her to become so much more aggressive and ruthless because she tried to help this girl, and then another woman who was supposed to be that girl's, I guess you can maybe say a friend or just at least an acquaintance that she's supposed to trust, literally just break her neck for no other reason than like, you know what, it's me against you guys. It's me against the world. So I don't care who's in it or not.
Well, and to that point, I think Amanda was actually like just a great choice to put in this movie for like all of those reasons, of course. But like this movie doesn't feel like they shoehorned her in like at all. Like it feels so purposeful. Like, they needed 2 people for the ending, and then what ends up happening. I love it. I think she was like a perfect choice. If it was Hoffman, it would almost be a little weird. I'm with you where I like Hoffman more as an accomplice versus Amanda, but this was perfect to examine their relationship, John and Amanda's, while also building upon who John Kramer is as a person. We get to see him be so vulnerable and actually make a mistake for like the first time ever, which once again humanizes him. No one's perfect, not even John Kramer. And I think that's so interesting how they were able to do that with all of these pieces that are already in place and maybe, arguably are already overcomplicated. They did it so well. They did this so well. If we get another continuation just like this in Saw 11, where it's Hoffman and Jigsaw explaining maybe a secret side of their relationship we never knew about, I'm so down. I am so into it. I want to see more stories told like this, little pocket stories like this, where sure it does affect and it kind of affects the overall plot line, but the big thing is it's just building upon what's already there. It's what the Saw franchise has always done so well. Just keep doing that. Keep doing that shit. Build upon the things we already know and make them even deeper than what we think. And I think this movie does that so well. If they continue to do that, make 100 more Saw movies.
Like, to that point, like, I feel like what Saw X also did well at was going back to John and Amanda's relationship. Like, Saw's always done the thing where, like, that continuing storyline, they try to add layers to the character. They try to show that, hey, these aren't just random actors that we brought in to be in a couple scenes, because half of them turned out to actually be prominent characters in like a following movie. And I feel like seeing the emotional aspect of like, oh, John really does care about Amanda. She's not just a pair of hands that he uses, and she actually cares and wants to be better. And that really adds to the arc, and I feel like very positive in compelling ways. And like I said, it definitely, I feel, shows how Amanda became so almost begrudgeful and just aggressive and ruthless as by the time we get to three. Because when we get to three, we see that how much she cares and wants him around, and we see how she's making things unwinnable. But we're also like, why is it like that? Why is she, how did they become so close? How is it that she feels like she's above his, what he believes is a moral code, and she's like, I'm just going to stick people in these traps just so I can see them suffer because reasons.
Yeah, and this movie deepens that. It gives us a reason, and I love it. I want more movies like this, not only in the Saw franchise, but in just other horror franchises. We're looking for ways to continue some of these long-standing franchises, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if we need another this or that X, Y in different franchises. I think this is the best way to do it. Like Saw X is the best way at this point with these long-standing franchises. If you want to do, another Michael movie, give us something fresh. Give us a pocket story. Give us something we haven't seen before, but in a way that feels so familiar. The whole concept itself doesn't have to be something so outlandish, and so like wildly different. We don't need that. You can have you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? You can just roll it well, and we'll enjoy it. And Saw X understands that. Like, sure, there are new facets to it, but the whole thing is still a Saw movie. Like, there are Saw traps in this that are brutal and familiar. Maybe not even the best of the whole franchise, but it's because the story is written so well. That's why I'm compelled by it. That's why I'll keep coming back for more. With that being said, do you have hopes for Saw 11? Because our producers like Oren Coles and some of the other people involved, Mark Berg, are talking about doing another one. What are your thoughts on that at this point?
My thoughts for the rest of this franchise is, if tomorrow they said, hey, you know what, Saw 11, let's go ahead and put that money towards something else, I'd be okay with it, because this would be a great swan song for them. They tried to do that with 3D, but unfortunately they had to cram two movies into one, and that rarely ever works for any movie. I know Jigsaw didn't turn out the way they wanted. I know Spiral didn't turn out the way they wanted, and I'm sure that they're very satisfied with the reception and the box office return. But at the same time, if they do more and they're like, hey, let's do maybe these one-off stories, let's do something different, whether that is Saw 11 becomes another spin-off, or it kind of explores other questions that they never really fully answered, that maybe they were planning on doing and didn't have a chance, or anything like that. Because you know what, perhaps maybe Saw X was lightning in a bottle. Maybe it was something where they had a meeting, and the person who's been like, hey, let's try this, like, they finally listened to them. But I have hope regardless. I have a good feeling. Saw X, I can tell, definitely left a good taste in people's mouths, and it really, I feel like a lot of passionate fans, including myself, felt that passion again. Like, I walked out of the theater like saying like, oh, I didn't really see that twist coming. You know, I loved that. The hype was real. I didn't I didn't even go in thinking like this could be a throwaway movie. Like, I've never hate watched anything in my life. Like, if there's something that I'm not interested in, I just don't watch it. If someone like is like, hey, check this thing out, you're really gonna like it, I'll more than likely do it. Because why not? But
Yeah.
I feel like Saw X is very much will be a good entry point for a lot of people too. And I've spoken to people who have straight up said like, I've never seen a Saw movie. I feel like seeing them beforehand, like, you definitely have more appreciation for the small Easter eggs in it. But if you haven't seen a Saw movie and you want to see Saw X, go for it. Go into it, because then maybe you'll appreciate the other ones more. Even because every franchise, like I said, there's going to be a bad day at the office, or there's going to be ones that people don't necessarily like. Like, I know a lot of people don't like Scream 3. I've always loved Scream 3. Like, I know that a lot of people feel like it's watered down, and perhaps it is. but 3 is definitely like it's a fun movie. It's definitely a goofier movie, but I know some people will consider that a bad day at the office. But I have faith regardless of whatever they do. You know, I feel like the only way that they can truly fail at Saw 11 is if they try to fail, or if they just let people who like let the suits behind the scenes say, "Hey, you gotta follow this beat by beat," because then people are going to be like, "Well, that's nothing new. That's Saw X 2.0." So I don't know, but what are your thoughts on it?
I'm so I'm like I'm down for a movie that's not exactly like Saw X 2.0, but something where it's like Mark Hoffman and Jigsaw like having a movie together. So it is like kind of doing the same thing that we did with Amanda and John in the last one, but it's a different kind of relationship. It's not the same thing between Mark and John as we've already talked about. So like I feel like that could work and it would be a different movie. Maybe even less of an emotional side to these characters and more just like a tense, like these characters have to work together because of the situation that's been presented. So I think that would work. It would be a different movie. It wouldn't be the same thing, I think, if they approached it from the right angle, from if people who understood the franchise were doing it. Like if Kevin Gruder does it, it'll be good. Like just bottom line. That concept, that'll work for Saw 11. Do we need something past that? I don't know. I don't even know if we need Saw 11. I'm kind of with you on the idea that that could be the swan song if that was the last one, and I'd be happy. But at the same time, if Tobin Bell's willing to do another one, he's like what, fucking 80. Run it, dude. Run it. Have him do another one if he wants to do it. Hell yeah, I'm here for it. But if not, I'm happy where they left it, man. It ended on a high note if that's the case. I as a huge fan of Saw X, if they do another one and it's anything like that, I'm fucking here for it, man. But also, I'm happy where it's at. I'm just really happy with the franchise overall. It's great. I love pretty much every entry here, and I'm so happy it exists. It's one of my favorite horror franchises ever.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Like I said, it's my favorite behind Scream, and it's had its highs and it's had its lows. But if anyone comes to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to do Saw Marathon," I'm like, "I'm down, dude. Let's do it right now."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can't help but have fun. Like how some people will say, like during certain like action movies, like you can turn your brain off and have a good time. Saw is like it's one of those things where it's like if you stay engaged enough in it to kind of follow the story, you're gonna have a good time. But you also don't have to, look at it like they're A24 movies. Where like Saw's not like Saw X is the closest thing to elevated horror that we've gotten so far. And I know that a lot of people don't like the term elevated horror, but I'm glad that Saw X brought emotion and it brought, it answered questions that we didn't realize we were asking.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to put it, man. I love that. Real quickly before we sign off here, so what's up with Deep Red Pictures, man? Give us a little insight on that.
Like I mentioned before, my best friend Mikey and I, we decided to finally kind of embrace our passion for film, especially like horror thrillers, and we came together. And earlier this year, we created Deep Red Pictures. We launched our official Instagram back at I believe it was the end of August. Soon we're going to be firing up our TikTok for any kind of behind the scenes things. We are currently in post production for a double home invasion feature featuring the same assailant. We created an original one. We're working currently on the mask and look for him, and we're currently dabbling in some titles. We are struggling with it a little bit, but I have confidence that we'll catch on to it soon. First script is written, and the second one we're halfway through so far, so that's exciting. We're hoping to do principal photography sometime in December or like January at the latest. We did our first official giveaway of our Scream 4K Blu-ray, and we picked our winner. So congratulations to Rebecca. Shout out to her. And we're looking to do more of those to kind of engage with people who are giving us the time of day and who are willing to go ahead and watch whatever we punch out. Hopefully they enjoy it or get any form of entertainment. It's going to be our main inspiration right now are the Stranger movies and Mike Flanagan's Hush. to anyone who hasn't watched Hush, I highly suggest you track it down. It's a very exciting, home invasion thriller with a different, a different like aspect to it. But yeah, man, we're just looking to do our thing and looking to see where it comes from. And like, so we really enjoyed Red Right Hand, and that was part of, kind of a catalyst, especially for me of like, hey, I want to do something like this too. There's passion behind it, you know, whether or not people, even if people watch it and they hate it, we're just going to be grateful that people watched it. But like I said, we're just looking to bring some entertainment, to pour heart and soul out into it, and we're very excited, and we hope other people get excited too. Like I said, we launched our Instagram. It's at Deep Red Pictures. We'll, like I said, probably do another giveaway soon, so hopefully whoever wants to join in on the experience, keep your eye out for more news soon, and possibly another giveaway soon.
Nice, man. Well, everyone go check them out on Instagram. That's badass. I can't wait to see the first feature, man, when it comes out.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate you bringing me on and talking, man. Big fan. I always look forward to your videos. Look forward to whatever you got going on next. I'm excited for the things you and your buddies are going to be punching out too.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that, Tyler. I'm so excited for you to see it, and hey, thanks for talking Saw with me, man. It was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on too, man. It was a great talk.
Of course. All right. Well, we will talk soon, and thanks again for watching, everybody. Don't forget to kill it out there, y'all. Peace out.